Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 359. Well, here we are again with Eric Thornton. We're here live in his healing studio. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we've had quite a lot of listeners give me feedback on our last few interviews, and they all good information. They all great. Love you. I haven't gotten one complaint, so we're having you back.
Well, that's great. What can I say?
And even several listeners have hired you and worked with you.
That's correct. I think about 10, 15 now. Quite a few from all over the world. I'm working with someone in Singapore, someone from China, from you, a lot of people from Canada, and from Eastern United States. So that's pretty good.
That's really neat. So for the listeners who haven't listened to our past episodes, I definitely encourage them to go back and listen to our past interviews because they were very enlightening. But I've gotten a lot of great feedback. A few listeners told me that listening to our interviews was life-changing for them. It helped them to understand parts of their life and who they are in a whole new way. And it really gave them clarity. So thank you.
Well, that's terrific. That's, why I'm here. I don't do my work for any other reason except to help people. And that's why I love to share. I don't try to keep exclusives on any of the processes we do. And I look at everything when we teach people something, we look at it as universal wisdom, and we hold up their ability to look at themselves from their guide's point of view. And so any of the processes we talk about are designed to get people to think and incorporate the other things they've learned as well. And it's very inclusive, the work. So it really seems to the past experience has been to people are very easily incorporating it into their lives. And that's one of our intents is to take away the mystery of spiritual work and make it something we do every day all over the world, instead of just from information from the Middle East or India or something like that. God works the same way all over the world.
Instead of just doing it on Sunday.
Instead of just doing it on Sunday or with special words and special words that are hard for people to understand take away the knowledge they need, and which makes it very difficult to become enlightened. It's almost like you're chasing someone else's tail, and they're like going, "Well, you can't quite know what this means." And so, because really, from my clients, and this is quite a broad statement I'm going to make, they meditate, they do all these procedures, and they really can't own it because they're told things that they don't understand. And so we try to hold people's. I'm giving information in sessions from people's guides that explain what's going on in their lives, how they're sitting in their lives, how to stop comparing culture, what we were just talking about, culture's thought forms, the cultural thought forms that keep us locked in patterns that don't fit most older souls. And so it causes stress in their lives. So we were talking earlier about happiness, intent versus enlightenment. And that's a big deal on how if the information's convoluted, how are you going to find that? How are you going to understand who you are? And so with every person that comes in for a session, we're always unveiling who they are so they can start to change or start to realize the difficulty they had is because of the culture that's built around younger souls versus the culture that older souls have to be in. They don't have a choice. And it causes people to feel inadequate causes the older souls to feel inadequate and to be stressed. So our job, most of the people I see are older souls in what we call the lives of discovery, and they are very confused and stressed by what they're supposed to be doing by the cultures versus what they need to be doing for them to uncover their happiness and joy.
You said lives of discovery. What does that mean?
When, this is going to take a minute. Okay. When we are, the human existence is a series of lives, of life, death, reincarnation, becoming godlike. And if you will bear with me with this demonstration, we'll kind of explain that to you. If you take a timeline of the human soul on the planet Earth, we call each life form that we come into a karmic cycle, meaning that we're here to learn and to grow in what it's like to be in that body type and what it offers for the growth of the soul. So we start out, maybe you take a timeline. On the far left, you have what we call a new soul coming into a body, a physical body for the first time. So the soul doesn't have physical experience yet, and it comes into a human body. Those people tend to be very radical. And when you imprint some way of anything, whether it's science, whether it's religion, culture, you imprint it, the first imprint, they're going to defend that imprint until the day they die. And they're going to be very radical about it. Those are quite young souls. And they'll live life after life after life with that, gaining wisdom from those separate points of view. And then as you have more and more time, you gain more and more wisdom, time in bodies. And about the middle point of this timeline, we call it the point of mastery. Everyone to the left, we call younger souls. And that's our main culture. And cultures, excuse me. There's many cultures within that, religious, political, et cetera, et cetera. And they come from people that are intelligent. They have emotions the same as everybody else does. And they create all these cultures. And then you hit this point of mastery. And you're there, you're wise, you're good, you've learned a lot, but you still follow these cultures. So you have presidents, you have world leaders that are there. They fall within these cultures. You have someone that people might be familiar with is like Margaret Thatcher or George Patton or Winston Churchill, or that it's Eva, oh, come on, leader of Brazil years ago. A very old soul, but not quite an old soul yet. They still will be politically in the limelight, and such. And they will, so they're still supporting the old cultures. You make this leap past the point of mastery, you're leaping into what we call the lives of discovery. These lives, if this change happens usually in the life between lives. And sometimes it happens during a life, and it's earth-shaking. Because what happens is you understand all these cultures innately inside, but you can no longer quite do it. So to be the mean girl or the bully doesn't work anymore. To go along with these cliques in school or in business cultures and things like that, it doesn't quite work. And you see the problem with it and how limiting these cultures are. And you become, in these lives, you understand it, but you don't want to participate in these cultures, but you do because you want to run with the rest of the kids or the rest of the adults, and you feel guilty for it, or bored, or frustrated, or you get, so it's like, come on, guys, understand this. And they're going because you're this old soul that is in the lives of discovery. They're like looking at you like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you do the 9-to-5 job? Why don't you do the 2.5 kids and minivan? Why don't you fall into your position? Well, after that point of mastery, you can't anymore. It just doesn't work. And we continue living life after life, gaining knowledge from that perspective now through discovery. And we are supposed to be discovering during these lives. And we discover gifts during those lives. Partial gifts, we never have them fully. We discussed that a little bit before, but the person will literally have sight or have a second knowing, really super good intuition or second sight, but it won't be full on. And they use it in acupuncture, they use it in Reiki, they use it in all kinds of things because they can feel energy and experience it. But the full picture's not there yet. So you live these lives doing, you can be a doctor and a nurse. They're good people with good intent. They can even have some lawyers with it. They're intelligent. But they don't quite fit in that factory worker thing. They don't want to, they're not going to do the same thing throughout life. But our cultures say do different.
So you say they're not going to do the same thing. So what you mean is like they don't want to work at one job for 40 years and then retire, which is sort of what society says is good to do. Mm-hmm. And or maybe the parents are saying, why don't you just get a stable job and work there till you retire? And there's an expectation, a cultural expectation to do this. And yet those who are in lives of discovery will go from job to job or career to career or school to school. Mm-hmm. and they can't do anything for more than 3 or 5 or 7 years. Yeah. Before feeling like they need to do something more, something different. And exactly. And sometimes they feel lost, or they feel like they're broken, or there's something wrong with them. Well,
they feel there's no life purpose, because their life purpose comes from the main cultures. And they don't fit the life that life purpose. So they come to a guy like me, or they seek other people. What's my purpose in life? I'm not meant to dig ditches, or I'm not meant to stand in a factory or to sell real estate for all this. It's not fulfilling. Where someone in these younger cultures, yeah, that's great. I've arrived. I'm earning $1 million a year. I've arrived. Where someone that's an old soul can earn $1 million a year doesn't mean anything to them, because they haven't found their purpose. Because their soul, their personality, soul's personality hasn't come out yet, hasn't been fully discovered. So they innately feel dissatisfied with the cultures that be.
So how do they then uncover their purpose and discover who they are?
The first step is to discover that they're barking up the wrong tree. If they try to be in these cultures and get everything from these cultures, they're not going to be happy. So that's the first thing they have to look at, like, we did with you, is we got, well, you don't fit. And
we can't see Eric. He's pointing at my husband, my husband is now quietly waving at the microphone. You guys, they can't see you.
Sorry.
I'm here.
But it's like sometimes we just hold this up, that they're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And that's the first step. And then it has to absorb. We remove the energy, the thought forms, and predatory energies that have to do with trying to put a square peg in a round hole. The frustration, the anger, the situations for mom and dad trying to get this kid to fit in and run down this certain pathway, and that all adds up in a person's crown, and it can eventually take on predatory energy, like we explained. It gets, the more you get, the more likely you're going to draw it to you, like a magnet. Well, it happens. We remove that. We bring this up to the person, and we look at it, and we go, okay, so you're a square peg in a round hole. Okay, so why don't we hang around with square pegs instead of trying to identify with the round pegs? So by doing this, you sit here and you start to look at it, and we start giving you the individual, the reasons they're there. Like with you, we looked at some past life. By the way, we do have permission from Duffy to talk about him, even if it's in the third person. Sorry. But it's like, okay, so we have to look at this, and we have to go, okay, why did you come to the parents you came to? What is it you're supposed to be learning? Oftentimes old souls come into parents that are younger souls. And so, but it's not by happenstance. We choose to make this happen so we can have a certain set of genetics at a certain time period, being male, female, whatever it is, so that we can learn from this set of genetics and this set of traumas that happen. When you're raised by younger souls, the older soul's traumatized because they can't be recognized. They can't be heard. They can't be embraced for who they are. Instead, the parents with younger souled parents, they try to fit this old soul into these breeches and shoes that they can't fit into. And that equals stress. And the parents sit there and scratch their head and they don't know why this kid won't do it. So that equals frustration. And the kids try to compensate for it. And they feel guilty. They pull it in. They blame themselves. They feel guilty. And it's like, this is one of the main things with people in the lives of discovery, is removing this guilt from this child that's still there. So that in the current life, they don't, similar situations come up and they're maybe being heard, but because a certain feeling or thought came up, they feel completely unheard by their spouse. And it doesn't have anything to do with their spouse. It has something to do with their past lives and the reason they came to the parents they did. So sometimes we're answering the other side of the learning curve of karma. We look at karma, like we explained, as a wonderful thing. It's learning. So like with some people, we have a past life where we caused similar situations of what they were raised in. And it's like, so now, and they learned from it. And so now they're to come into that themselves and see if they can rise above it. So what was your past life what was that?
An industrial chemical worker.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you unbeknownst to you, you were an industrial, was it a supervisor type thing or something up in it? And that you were in charge of how things were produced, like gears and motors and things like that, which had a lot of chemicals in it. And a lot of people got sick, but nobody knew. So there was no harm, no foul. It didn't create karma, but it did create a situation in your body. Now, was your grandparent something like that too? Your grandfather was a chemist too, which brought in a chemical predisposition to your body. And and so your body doesn't get rid of, between the two of these, your body doesn't get rid of toxicity very well. So when we worked with you, we worked at, from the backside, releasing the reason you hold toxicity and heavy metals and things like that from the backside, so that your body could start dumping them slowly. And we told you would feel kind of odd for about 10 days to 2 weeks while your body dumps a lot of this stuff. And sure enough, today you're telling me you don't feel very well, and you haven't felt very well. And it's because you're dumping toxins now, because you released the reason your body wouldn't let go of them. And so, and like we told you, you're a vegetarian. We said, eat greens, because chlorophyll pulls out toxins that are in your blood. It doesn't pull it out of your tendons, but it does pull it from your blood. And the minerals in veggies and fruits help also pull out other toxins. So it's a great time to have a really clean diet. And and of course, I don't think we mentioned, but drinking plenty of water works too.
My husband gave me a knowing look, because every 5 minutes I'm like, "Are you drinking your water? Are you drinking your water?" So Duffy had his session 2 days ago. Yeah. And he comes home and he's like, Eric warned me I'm going to feel a little tired as my body's healing. And sure enough, Duffy's been totally wiped out, more than any other healing, more than acupuncture or massage or anything. He's been pretty wiped out.
I have been. Yeah.
To me, I tell people when they have these effects, because you expect to come away from a healer feeling good. Well, some people do. It's like, pfft. But it's like, it's actually a good sign if you're feeling bad, if they're working on your toxicity. And and it's you kind of, in our cultures and the main cultures of the society, they want a cause and effect immediately, and they want to control these things, and you can't get the body to release toxins that it's emotionally hooked to. Nothing's going to release if you're emotionally hooked to it. And it's like, it simply will not happen. We mentioned it before. I had a client that's grandfather had the heavy metal poisoning. Her body wasn't going to release it because of grandpa's love. Well, you had it from past life. And we had to teach the body to go, okay, we can do this. And then it starts to happen. And then other people's work works better. So if you were going to a naturopath, the medicines from the naturopath would work better, as long as it didn't make you more toxic. And or from an allopathic, it would work better. If you're detoxed at a great level, then the medicine's going to work right. The Western medicine will even work better because you have a clearer path for it. Where you mix some Western medicine or any chemicals with a bunch of other chemicals, you're going to have a disastrous outcome. Where if you clean them up, you have a good outcome. So that's why we say the work is inclusive, because it makes everybody's work better. It makes your brain clearer so you can actually have a conversation. It's a big deal. So anyway, in this process, I literally set up the session. We talk for an hour to 2 hours, and we talk during the session. And this is very important for people to understand, and you've experienced it now. We talk about it because it lights up the neural pathways in your brain, much like brain surgery. And it's the brain surgeon will put you under, drill the holes in your head, or however they're going to get in there, put you in the halo, and then they wake you up. And they talk you through the surgery. So it lights up different neural pathways so they can see not to cut those. And it's the same way here. We're not cutting anything, of course, but we talk about things, and some people think, well, we talk too much. Well, no, this is a different type of healing. This lights up the neural pathways specifically because we have millions of them. And the guides go, okay, there it is. Let's give that better neuroplasticity. Because in your session, Duffy, the neural pathways were influenced by the past life and this life. And so those get lit up, made so that they can change, give it better neuroplasticity. And then the process of changing the body starts with you in your case, and the brain goes, oh, okay, I can do this instead of this old pattern. But if you don't soften those up, that's not going to happen. They just keep going back to the default setting subconsciously and consciously. So that's why we do a lot of talking during the process, to light those up, to get them to better neuroplasticity, to get them open to change. With you, we didn't give you specific exercises to do as of yet. But some people, depending on who they are or what the situation is, we will give them specific things to do, specific books to read, sometimes very specific diets for short periods of time or long periods of time. We talk about allergens. We also give you specific to your guides. They will literally give me a spiritual exercise for that person to do. And oftentimes it's different than everybody else. There are some certain things we can all do, like we've talked about the energy exchange. But other than that, it's more of an individual thing.
So you're talking to your clients' guides. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between guides and angels?
Okay, well, the angels are what we call non-evolutionary souls. They are angels. They are never going to embody. They are spiritual beings given a specific job with quite broad spectrum, but still very specific. We are evolutionary souls. So we start out with very little knowledge, gaining knowledge with life after life after life after life, and gaining the wisdom. Angels have specific jobs for eternity, and they're perfectly happy with that. They're designed to do that. They learn within their job boundaries, and if they need to go beyond their boundaries, they call another angel with the next set of knowledge. Where evolutionary souls go, oh, well, let's look at that. and gain the knowledge themselves. And so it's a very different perspective as well. So we gain knowledge life after life after life, and we're continue on this timeline we were talking about. So at the end of the lives of discovery, we are born with the gifts on. That's a master. Then there's levels of mastery to where we become the ascending master. And the ascending masters are amazing. They are good at everything. I'm not there yet. I was born with the gifts on, but I can see through a wall, for example, but I can't float through a wall. And I still have a little fear about hard objects appearing in the middle of my body. So, but they've entered a point where they're now proving all of the things they've learned in all of their past lives, clear back to when they first came into the planet, and if they came from another planet, what the New Age calls them star children. And you can draw on any one of them as you're used to work on. So people who are good, amazing seers will see when I work on them, they'll see part of me shapeshift into those past lives. So I will look like a slightly different person. And I just, because I enter this meditative state when I work on anybody. And they look at me like, who are you now? And then I'm from this past life, because I'm able to tap into each past life at this point. And they can, some of them can even describe me, and they're accurate. And I'm always not real tall. Come on, I'm working on that. Come on. Come on, 5 more inches, please. But anyway, I've been on the planet a long time, and people didn't used to be real tall, and it seems to be locked in. I'm still the average height of a person 150 years ago. 5'6", right? So anyway, but I use a lot of humor with it. But anyway, so we have these past lives to grow and learn and become this master. And then we have the levels of mastery. As we become the ascending master, when we pass, we become a guide, if we want to, or we move on to another part of the universe. And then Buddhism calls that nirvana. You're not ceasing to exist. You're ceasing to exist here on these planes. You go to another one and you learn more. You don't start off as a newbie or as a young soul anymore. You're starting off as an old soul in any life form, because universal wisdom applies everywhere.
So guide is someone who's been through the whole cycle and now chooses to be a guide rather than come into a physical body.
Correct.
Can a guide choose to have an incarnation in a physical body, or are they like done with the physicality?
They can choose to do it again. And but they generally, once you're a guide, it's a lot of time that passes by, because you're a guide with the same soul. It's not the body. So you may be with someone in various bodies for 10 or 15 lives while they're learning your specific expertise as the guide.
That sounds like fun.
It is. And remember, time only means something to the body. It doesn't mean anything to a soul. So if you spend 1,000 years with someone, it doesn't mean anything. And so you really, guides know us really, really well. Way better than we'll ever know ourselves. And they're fascinating. But they have wicked senses of humor too. Because not wicked as in evil, but wicked as in funny. Because they've been there and they have done that. And they've been in all the different choices we have with our bodies and preferences and things like that. And they get it, and they don't care.
So you can hear guides and angels talk to you. How do you know the difference between the two?
Angels are very distinctive because they don't have that. They don't have the same frequency because they've never been embodied. So it's really easy for me to tell the difference. They have it's kind of like meeting someone who is, we'll use another word we used earlier today, very demure, versus someone who's Robin Williams. And not all guides are Robin Williams, of course, but it's like they'll have that presence about them that's just fits with you because they've done it. Where angels, they literally don't give off that frequency at all. They have senses of humor, but they just aren't that been there, done that sense of humor. So it's a very different frequency. Now, we all have what has been termed in some groups called an angel, a guardian angel, because their job mainly is to keep us alive. And the where guide's job is to help us with the stress of being an old soul. So I was explaining it to Duffy, and I think I've explained it. We've talked about the size of the radar dishes. And the old souls have these giant radar dishes that take in 100,000 gigabytes of information for every one that a younger soul takes in. And it overwhelms the older soul. But those are the lessons.
You talked about how some people who are, you call them sensitives, or those who are older souls, can become exhausted from doing things like going to a mall or going grocery shopping because they're taking in all the energies from other people.
They're perceiving it. And where someone else has no perception of it. So they get exhausted, and they need to learn and be guided to people that can hopefully help them learn about this radar dish or these perspectives that have made them very sensitive. They're sensitive in the amount of knowledge coming in, but the stress of this massive knowledge has made their bodies very sensitive.
You say you work with a lot of healers, that you are like you like to heal healers. You help healers heal themselves so they can go on to be better healers for other people. Do most or are all healers older souls that are more sensitive with a bigger radar dish because older souls are drawn to becoming healers, or they have some of their gifts on, or can younger souls also be healers?
Younger souls can be healers in a mechanical way. They can't be healers in an intuitive way. Old souls have that ability to feel energy. And that sensitivity that is supposed to happen, that physiologically changes as we get damaged. There's a change that takes place. We have the classic wounded healer. So if you're an old soul and you have this giant radar dish, it's too much information for the body. The body's made to take the small radar dish. We have this exact same body, says younger souls, in other words. But we got this huge perception problem. And that we take in so much information, we become very, very, very physically and mentally stressed. And it wounds us. And it starts at birth, or even before birth. And it starts wounding. And when we get wounded, slowly or suddenly, we go into what's called a hyper alert position. And the amygdala, which is the gland above your ear that has on both ears, which joins at the frontal lobe, starts to work extremely fast. It already works extremely fast. It's the gland that's connected to the digestive brain, and you can look that up. And the digestive brain uses the sense of touch only. The main brain uses the sense of touch, taste, sound, the six senses. The digestive brain is only touch. So if someone's staring at you with malintent, you need to know. So instinctually, the amygdala was formed, and the digestive brain was formed for safety. I was listening to Oprah one time, and what she said was the research on it, so I'm just quoting her, that the amygdala can tell friend or foe in 30 millionths of a second. Well, when you get wounded and you go on hyper alert, that particular aspect can speed up to 100 millionths of a second. And it is in that, if you think of millionths of a second, it's pure frequency. So if you can pick up frequency of friend to foe between 1 second and a 30 millionths of a second, and you have that turned on now to pick it up to 100 millionths of a second, that's where the gifts are, between 30 millionths and 100 millionths of a second. And even beyond that. That's where you start picking up the frequency of sound that's not in our physical world, or in the 3D. You're going to pick up guides. You're going to pick up guardrails. You're going to see things moving around you. We all do, but you're going to see them more, and you're going to start seeing figures or something to help somebody with, maybe an argument with a parent or something when they were young, when you're working on their leg. And that information's there. But if your radar dish is picking it up at 30 millionths of a second, you won't be able to see it as a therapist. But as a old soul therapist, then you're going to pick that up, and you're going to get a totally different type of session. So again, we're talking about stress and cultures. So then you got someone, let's say, is a massage therapist, and they're working with someone, their younger soul. What are they going to do for that massage versus someone who's an older soul that's a massage therapist? What's going to be the difference in their techniques? The one from the old soul is going to be much deeper, because they can perceive what's going on and move to the places without even being told.
So we have this amazing chiropractor, and we totally love him. And just as a side note, since we got, and I got to tell you about this mattress, but since we got our new bed 35 days ago, we actually haven't needed to go back to our chiropractor. And we used to go like, I know, it's so amazing.
Yeah.
But we used to go almost weekly, sometimes more than, like sometimes twice a week, because I'd wake up with injuries. I'm like, I'm not that old. Why am I waking up with a neck injury, right? Or a back or lower back.
Right.
And he thinks like a mechanic. He has no, he doesn't follow intuition. It's just, but he's amazing, and we love him. I mean, if we could adopt him, we want to keep him. We love him. He's semi-retired right now, so we're a little bit sad about that. He's going to go into retirement soon, but he has, he brought in a chiropractor to buy his clinic, and she is wonderful, but doesn't do his same techniques. And we kept asking, why isn't she learning from you? You're over, almost, 40 years in the business. What's going on? He goes, she has this intuition. And I keep asking her, why did you adjust that? Why did you do this? And she goes, I just know to go there. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I don't understand her process, but he goes, she's got this intuition. I don't have that. And he respects it, which is great. Yeah. But he's like going to a mechanic. He goes, he looks at your body and he goes, okay, this muscle group is causing this, but it's coming from here, and it's this nerve bundle, and this is why I'm going to adjust this. And he can explain everything. Mm-hmm. And you might come in with neck pain, and he'll, adjust your ankle, right, and everything will come back into alignment, because he thinks like a mechanic. So he's a younger soul thinking more like a mechanic. It's a great adjustment. But his now, the other chiropractor has taken over the clinic. Mm-hmm. She, pure intuition. Mm-hmm. She comes up and she just feels and knows where to adjust, and she can't explain why.
Right. Well, they both might be old souls. One of them's taking the mechanics that all chiropractors learn, and they learn themselves the order of it. Where in the chiropractic, it's just you learn this move one day, this move another day, this move another day. You learn that someone's knee might affect their shoulder. But how do you assemble that as an individual and your practice? And I'll be honest, that guy, the guy who's mechanical with it is, like I say, he's probably an older soul. He's learned out a technique. He's taken his information and made his own technique with it. Mm-hmm. And I would still bet he works on people differently individually.
He's pretty amazing. I think you're right.
He's hooking a series of sequences that he's learned or intuited, and he can plug that into this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, where the other one is more of an emotional thinker. So then she's taking her old soul status and using it to really feel the minutia in the body and different parts of it that are connecting these mechanical sequences, because she's also moving the body mechanically. So it's just two different approaches to this massive knowledge that they're getting. And so I wouldn't say either one of them is a young soul unless I met them, then I could tell you. The young soul can do that, but they're not going to have the magic from it.
I was a massage therapist in Canada, and I was taking a course on craniosacral therapy. Mm-hmm. And I had almost no experience with craniosacral, other than I was told it was really cool to add to my tool belt.
And you have one of each.
I have a cranium and a sacrum. Yes. So
you have experience.
we do. I do. I physically do have those. I was in the course and working on a woman, basically they taught the technique. Mm-hmm. My hands are on her. I'm doing the technique, and I'm seeing in my, and which was really sort of shocked me because I didn't think that I thought craniosacral was just manipulation of the body. I had no idea that there was a spiritual component to it. Lo and behold,
everything that have to do with humans has a spiritual component to it.
yes, right. Well, we're learning. We're learning this now, and so I'm working on her, and I can see trauma and abuse and what the abuse was and where it was still being held in her body, and what has sort of like I could see like like in the CSI TV show how they put a blue light over someone and they can see like old scars or old bruises. I could see them, and I could see sort of which ones she's worked on, like healing wise. And so I felt compelled to talk to her about it, but I also felt really weird. Like, hey, by the way, while I was working on you, I saw that you were molested. And, I mean, like, it's sort of a weird conversation. And so I brought it up with her, and I said, what I saw is, I saw these two areas. One that you worked on this area, but and I described another area that that was still very raw emotionally. And she said, and because she was very experienced with craniosacral, so I guess she knew that this is something that happens. And she goes, "Oh yeah, you're right. 30 years ago, this such and such happened, and I've worked on it. And you're right; those are all old wounds, but I've done a healing, and it's sort of like the scar tissue's left behind, but I've done the work." And she acknowledged that what I saw, the new wounds that hadn't healed yet, were emotional wounds, were still being held in her, I think, around the diaphragm area. And that to me was amazing, that when you can touch someone and actually get visions and see what's going on in their body on an emotional level, like the emotions were being held in injuries in the body.
Right. That's why we heal the healers. You have that ability, and yet that was one of the first times you used it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so if you took that person with these traumas held in her body and you released it and she's done with it, it's out of her body. It's done. If the practitioner releases it and there's still learning to do, it doesn't go away. It'll release it, the muscles will relax, you'll get some benefit from it, and 2 weeks later it's right back. That's telling us there is a spiritual component to it still. So if that person that you've discovered that with still had the predatory energy from her attackers, her molesters, if she still had the grooming, if she still had all these things going there, you would be able to release the muscles then because you saw why they were tight. But she maybe hasn't finished learning from it yet. So then a guy like me would take that, and we would go through and see who, what, when, where, and why. What you're supposed to be learning from coming to parents or people like this, or having them involved in your life in some way. And then we take that and we learn from it. We don't look at anything as positive or negative, even that. What are we supposed to be learning from it? Yeah, do I think it's tragic? Oh, heaven, yes. It's one of the worst things that can happen to humans, being molested when you're young, because it changes your emotional status for the rest of your life. But that being said, if you turn it into a learning process, you can heal from it and not just be a survivor, but become the person you're supposed to become because of it. And then you are healed. And then you find your pathway. Then you find your meaning in life. In the meantime, on a major thing like that, you won't find it. It can stare you in the face, and you'll think it's trauma. We call those cross wires. And someone associates love with being abused, manipulated, etc. Then out in the world, they're going to look at jobs, they're going to look at people for love equals abuse, manipulation, etc. And so they're never going to find what they're supposed to be doing. They can't ever see it until this work is done. And then they'll be out there doing something, and they'll go, it's like a new sense of smell. It's like, oh, that looks good. And they start to find their purpose, or they start to discover they're actually doing their purpose, but they could never settle into it because of these constructs of what love or friendship or work means that has to do with people that they can't align with, the younger soul parents.
I like that you've mentioned in the past that people who come to you often have had health issues that they've seen everyone for, and that it's only when they do the spiritual and emotional work with you that it's just that last sort of pin that needed to be pulled out.
To make everything work, to make all their efforts work. It's so important to include everything people have done prior to seeing me. That is so absolutely important. And it's mechanically important as well as spiritually and physically. You can even literally have mechanical work done on you 5 years before you see me, and it won't take effect until the day we do the work. And then all of a sudden they'll go home and they'll roll over and their whole back will realign, where it wouldn't do it. You mentioned the chiropractors. They'll do it and they'll go in and keep going in, and it won't hold. And they've done all this work. I'm usually, unfortunately, the last resort. And it's like, it's too bad, because when you're the first resort, you get things done a lot faster. You don't have to suffer as long. But we're stubborn. We don't want to go into something that's the unknown or the mystery.
And a question that had come to mind that I wanted to ask you, this might be too generalized because I know each individual has their own reasoning. Tell us about autoimmune disease. Is there a common thread as to the cause and a common way to heal it, or is it really individualistic?
It's very individual. It's very, very individual. Because like we're talking about with Duffy here, his immune systems are coming from past lives that he's had, and also his grandparents. And it's like, so, and what they did as individuals, those people did. And that doesn't apply to other people with autoimmune systems today. So I don't have any precognition as far as, or I don't know if that's the right word, but I go into the session innocently, because we have a certain amount of symptoms. I think we have 280 something symptoms, and we have 10 or 15,000 different diseases and abnormalities and things like that the human body can have, but only 280 symptoms. So if you go in there thinking that this symptom specifically means this, you have missed the boat. So I go at it very innocently, and it always gives me the perspective from the guides that the person needs right now. So like with someone, again, like you, Duffy, this was a huge anchor for some of your issues. So we release the anchor. You still have the issues, but the body's got to get used to not having that anchor. Then we can start on the specifics. We get in, I tell people, first sessions are very different than ongoing sessions, because first sessions, we got to release the main bulk that you're carrying around. The body has to learn that we're not going to hurt it subconsciously and consciously, and then it will let us in to a much deeper level, to where we get specifically you versus the effects of other people on you. What's actually happened to you specifically? Those come in generally, sometimes a little bit in the first session, but more in the ongoing sessions. And and sometimes people just need 1 or 2 sessions or 3. Some people want ongoing. They want to really get their lives cleaned up. And but it's like, okay, so we dig in, and each time I might see people for years, because that's just what they work with, and they're always getting to the next huge level, and their bodies change dramatically after each session, very, very dramatically. They become completely different personalities, because they're becoming their soul's personality instead of the injured personality. And that's where things come up like enlightenment.
Didn't you notice that my voice lowered almost
yeah.
right away?
That was something I wanted to say, was like, so I wasn't allowed to be in the room when Duffy was getting his session. I was all ready to come sit in the corner and be a fly on the wall. And Duffy comes out when I picked him up, and after his session he comes out, and I noticed that his voice had dropped. I don't know how many octaves. I don't know what an octave sounds like, but his voice dropped. noticeably, not fake, not like it wasn't forced, but it was his real voice. And I noticed that when he's in a state of stress, his voice becomes higher. I mean, within the male range of, voice, but his voice becomes sort of stressed and higher pitched. And I hadn't heard that relaxed, deep voice for a long time. And so I just noticed that was a shift. I mean, his energy shifted, but his voice physically shifted.
Which shows the release of stress, subconscious stress. When the body can acknowledge this, that's when it knows we're not going to hurt it. And then we start going in there and we start getting these very specific cross wires. Most people, once you bring it up, they can go, oh yeah. And they can look at it then and they can change it. So like if love equals being highly critical, for example, love gets crosswired with all kinds of things. It's not always love, but that's a real common one. And so if love equals highly critical, then you're on hyper alert to be critical because you love everybody. And so you're stressed. And if you can release that love equals because you breathe, which is what we ultimately want, your stress levels drop down. But that's a lot between love is critical, a lot of distance between love equals being critical and love equals because your presence, I love your presence when you're breathing. And no judgment. Those are a long distance away. And we have to go in and get the specific cross wires that come up with love equals being critical. And then all of a sudden, the person becomes, their voice changes, their being changes, their tones change, and they may be very intelligent, but they realize that, oh, just because I know something doesn't mean I need to say it. And so the critical part goes away. You've recognized that when you're giggling.
Yeah, certain relatives of mine match that. Can you remember that quote, and we can feed it back to certain relatives that shall not be named? Okay.
Sometimes it's better that way. Yeah. But when you can change that, then people's perception of you completely changes too, and you've changed complete frequencies. And so you don't even want to hang out sometimes with some of the people that were hanging out with you because of the negative interaction. You changed to a more positive outcome, a more positive being, a more enlightened point of view, and all of a sudden these people don't want to be around you anymore because they're still stuck in the negative points of view. So when people do this work, sometimes we have to say, you're going to change enough now that friends aren't going to like you anymore, certain friends, because you're no longer in alignment with them. People that have anger hang out with people that are angry. All of a sudden you're not angry anymore and you're going, I got this to do. Sorry, guys. And so it changes who you hang out with too. So these perspectives are what vary between happiness and enlightenment. The happiness is a joke. It's a laugh. Enlightenment is joy. And that you still have stress. You still have the human problems when you're in enlightenment, but you move to the place of joy very quickly instead of staying in this anger or frustration for years on end and destroying families and things like that. So as you go through the process, our goal is enlightenment for people. Enlightenment being, like we discussed on the last session, enlightenment being a very simple definition of being able to move through the problems in life instead of being stuck on them. So you have time left over just to exist and enjoy it. And when you're enjoying it, you feel joy. It just comes to you. And every person, how they get there is different. And that's why so many of the mechanical type spiritual things don't work. Because it's the same practice for everybody. And just like aspirin, it affects everybody differently. So people get stuck in a practice and they're stuck and they're not enlightened. So individually, we have to learn our own path to going to that place of joy and enlightenment. And it's a choice. It's all of it's a choice. We can choose to be happy, but we have to make choices consciously with intent to become enlightened, where you find that joy, even when you're in the middle of an argument. And we have to make those choices, but like we talked about in the beginning of this, spirituality is so confused. The cultures are so confused, religious, spiritual, etc., and scientific. And it just keeps people from actually getting there. And you can apply that to many cultures. You apply it to the political realm, which we're not going to get into today. But what do in the politics world, those cultures, if you confuse the people, you got control over them. It's the same thing spiritually. You confuse people, and they can't get there. So you're controlling the enlightenment process.
You remind me of up until very recently in the Catholic Church, I mean, in history, up until, I don't know exactly when, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, whatever it was, 500 years ago, that the Bible was not printed in English, and most people didn't know how to read, or not, I mean, there was a considerable amount of people that didn't know how to read,
Right.
and that it wasn't written in English, and so they trusted that the priest would give them the word of God, which allowed that, like, is that disconnect that they were waiting for the spirituality to get fed to them.
Correct.
And it kept them confused enough, because if they couldn't read it, they couldn't memorize passages, they couldn't be empowered by
They
it.
also couldn't call the church on the crap. If you don't know what they're saying, you can't raise your hand and go, you're taking that one a little too far. There's a lot of humanity in that instead of just the word. And then they build on the humanity.
Right.
And it becomes this big political quagmire instead of from the original information.
Right.
And so it was very much on purpose.
In Quebec, which is a province in Canada, they saw that the French saw that they were far outnumbered from the English. And so politically, they told the churches to tell all the people that came that it was God's will that they needed to have very large families.
Good big Catholic family, huh?
Right. Well, so still to this day in Canada, it's very typical to see a family of 12 children if they're in or from Quebec or Catholic, and that it was so that they, this is all politics, right? But this is just an example of how politics uses religion to control, in the past has used it to control the population. And that's just an interesting example that because of that, Quebec was able to populate themselves very quickly, enough to take over that region, and is still in control of the region to this day.
Well, we have the same thing here with these abortion fights. We have a work shortage. We have a labor shortage of people that can do that type of thing. And we can limit our growth to 1 or 2 children. So the population isn't feeding itself. A population has to grow like an economy in order to feed itself. And so politically, they've politicized women's birth rights so that they can control the population. They did the same thing in China. They had too many people. You women, you get pregnant, you're either going to have an abortion because you only have 1 child. If you don't, you got to pay us 20 grand or 30 grand or whatever it is, the government. And that's how they control the population. The population now, because theirs was too many. So it's very politicized in these cultures. And it's confusing, and it keeps the spiritual growth from happening. How do we get into this? Do you want to get into that?
Into what?
The abortion stuff? Or that type of thing, the political things?
I was more thinking about going down the road of how to help people find clarity in their spirituality,
right?
Even though there's a cultural intent to keep them away from it.
Okay, so to finish out the abortion issue, if you think for a moment that God doesn't know abortions happen or miscarriages, you're crazy. There's huge lessons from either one for both parents. And and those lessons are only good. Now, should abortion, in my opinion, be used for birth control? No. But there's huge lessons in women that have had it, and the men that have provided. I've worked with them, and they have enormous gifts come from these things. And yet our political system takes that knowledge and says, and confuses it, and makes people feel very guilty for doing this. And it's like, then it stalls their walk, because they feel, the cultures have made them feel so bad that they die with guilt instead of joy. So, there's an extreme of everything that's human. That I'm human too. I get it. But there's also a point to doing things correctly, in the right timing and everything else. And if things are settled, then the couple or the woman alone can make a proper decision for themselves that they are at peace with. And it's done. And they don't have to carry this burden around their whole life that stops their spiritual growth.
I talked about this in a past episode, but I worked with a woman, geez, back in 2005, 2006. It was right around New Year's, so can't remember whether it was in 2005 or 2006, right around there. And this woman had chronic pain, massive. She was on like Tylenol 3 every day. And for years, I think for over 10 years, she was on this pain medication, and she was a long distance runner. And the doctors kept saying to her, it's because you have arthritis from long distance running. And I knew it wasn't.
Something told you.
And I palpated her back. We did an 8-hour breakthrough session using NLP and timeline therapy.
Wow.
And so I palpated her back, and I felt her quadratus lumborum on one side. This is a square shaped muscle on the back, was cold and hard, meaning there was no circulation there.
Right.
And then on the other side, it was nice and malleable and warm. And I know that when we have unresolved emotions and we're not facing them, our body will manifest in the muscles, will actually squeeze the muscles so tight it creates pain.
Exactly.
So that we listen, so that we pay attention. And as we were working through, it took a few hours of talking, like you do in your sessions, to finally come upon the secret she'd never told anyone, that she had an abortion, and she was Catholic, and she felt incredibly guilty. And she went in, so I had her tell me the whole story, and she went into the session, and the nurse came to give her the pain medication before the abortion happened. And she said, no, I'm not taking any pain medication. And the nurse was concerned. The doctor came in and said, this is really uncomfortable. You're going to want to take it. And she said, I have to pay for this guilt and pain.
Oh.
And I nearly fell off my chair. I said, did you hear what you said?
Yeah.
And she said, I said, you have been experiencing physical pain every day since your abortion, because you're still holding on to the guilt of it. And she said, no, I paid for it that day. I said, listen to your body. Where's your guilt right now?
Exactly.
And where's your pain? And so she finally, like, the light bulb went off, and she realized that every time she felt guilt, her back pain would flare up to like a 10 out of 10. And she'd take a pain med to numb it, because she was stuffing down those emotions. And so we did the emotional work and released the guilt. Her pain went to 0. I touched her back, and the quadratus lumborum that had been previously hard and cold there was red. It was like the circulation came back. Yeah.
And that's induced by culture.
Right.
That's induced
the
by
religious culture.
By man saying what God thinks.
We're not condoning. We're not saying, yay, everyone should go get an abortion. That's what we're like you said, we wouldn't want to use it like as a birth control.
No,
it's not
very hard on the female's body, physically hard. You have so many abortions, and then you can't carry children anymore.
Well, and also,
so
there's a heartbeat. That it's a human being that we're killing.
Right. At some point, and this is where our discovery hasn't gotten there yet. A soul doesn't necessarily hook to the body at physical conception. There can be a heartbeat, there can be brain waves, and that soul's still not hooked to that body, and that's not a viable egg yet. So, and there's many things that happen that people don't understand that has to do with karma and souls processes and things like that.
I think we have to go here now.
Okay. I'm going to give an example. I know a lady who was Catholic and is Catholic, and in her 50s she got pregnant. Well, the doctor said, if you carry this, you're going to die. And because she was too old and she had too many children before, and it just wasn't going to work. And so she reluctantly had an abortion. And she felt guilty of it for years and years and years. And she had children and grandchildren born, and she soon found out that one of those grandchildren was in fact the hook to the fetus that she had aborted. Because this isn't a waste. Souls want to come into a family, genetics. And if it doesn't happen here, it's going to happen over here. I have a client, another client, she miscarried or had a stillborn. And that child, that soul that was hooked, I mean, it went to full term, and there was something that went wrong. And horrible, awful, and I'm not discounting any of the pain and suffering. But her second child, she had another one, and the next one is the same soul that was hooked to the one that was stillbirth. So see, God knows what's going on here. If you were using the word God, and it's like, and it's okay, but man, in their ignorance, sets up rules, and become part of our cultures that make it so people can't grow spiritually. They have to stay as the follower, the sheep, if you will, instead of becoming the shepherd. Because if they become the shepherd, they look at governments and go, honey. And they vote for what's right instead of the latest cultural trend. Excuse me. And so the cultures that be like these points of control, and they keep people in the lives of discovery from finding who they are and being able to help the rest of the population towards enlightenment.
So let's help those that are listening, that are in their lives of discovery. Let's help them to gain clarity so they can find their spiritual path with, clearly, without having cultural intent blind them or muddy the water. So what advice or what tools, what can you say, or what kind of homework can you give those listening who want to gain more clarity and freedom around their spiritual path?
Well, we all have our soul's personality and our default personality, which is the personality that's formed in childhood, and our current personality. And the current personality is actually a combination of both the soul's personality or the soul's history and the default personality. And so within each person, there's a fight between the two. And old souls distinctly know it. So they go and they do this, X, Y, and Z for a living, or they do it or they get in these routines and habits, whatever they are. But something in them tells them it's not enough, it's not right, it's not thus and so. And our cultures say, no, you have to do this. Well, pay attention to what something in you innately is going. This isn't enough. This isn't right. And then we throw in from our cultures the idea of success. And what we're supposed to be doing brings success. Well, success to an old soul is joy. It's not cash. Yes, we have to have cash to live in the world. But if you're doing something that's not at all going to bring you joy in an old soul, you're not, or something, if you're in the lives of discovery, it'll bring you joy for a while, and then the old soul, we need to move on, so it stops bringing you joy. Well, that's a sign of your soul's personality, to pay attention to these things and go, okay, instead of fighting it, because the old cultures say stick with it, go, oh, okay, this is coming to a close now. So I'm opening my eyes up. What's going to show up and have me naturally, easily gravitate over there instead of having a big eruption and, oh my God, I lost my job and all this stuff on and on and on because it didn't pay attention to when it was telling you, okay, I need to move on. And then you naturally grab, if you pay attention, you just naturally start opening your eyes up and you let the world manifest for you. If you get to the critical point where you're disgusted, you can't stand it, and da 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 da, you can't recognize when the world's manifesting it for you because you're too under the frustration.
That kind of sounds like being stuck in victimhood.
Oh yeah, that's part of our culture. Victim is an award in our culture, and in the largest percentage of our culture, and because then that's who you are. You become a victim. That's who we're taught we have to be. And they keep changing the rules to keep us victims, where old souls go, nope, but we need to pay attention to it early on. If you're an old soul and you have an obligation, like let's say you have a family, well, you kind of can, as an old soul, you can go, okay, I know everything is going to lead to something new. And I can go get a job where I'm doing the mechanics to bring home a paycheck. And because I'm an old soul and relaxed, I can keep my eyes open for all the networking that's going to happen in this job that I manifested. If you keep going, I hate this job, I can't stand it, but I'm doing it to support my family, you will never discover the networking that your guides will give you to find the next thing to do that's in your pathway. But our cultures say, stick with it no matter what. And then you miss the boat.
That's the golden handcuffs.
Totally, completely that.
This reminds me of a story my dad told me. My dad was the kind of person that he had over 200 employees, and he just would kind of fall in love with them. And after they left, he wished them well, and he'd like to stay in touch with them. He loved reaching out to people and helping people. He had a really big heart. And this one guy who had worked for him for a while called him up crying and freaking out. And he wasn't employed by my dad anymore. And he said, I don't know what to do. We just lost our house. I'm sitting in our car. I got my kids and my wife, and we're homeless right now, and I don't know what to do. And my dad described him as being really stuck in that victim mentality, unable to see, like you said, unable to see the opportunities, right? Because he was so bought into the woe is me. I can't get a job. I can't get a house. Oh my gosh, we're going to be homeless. And he just kept focusing on the negative and not seeing the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And my dad said, what, didn't you tell me you had an aunt in like this other part of the province 4 or 5 hours away who wanted you to come live with her and be her caretaker so that she didn't have to go to an old folks home? And she said that when she died, if you did this when she died, she'd leave you her house. And the guy
had a wonderful memory.
And well, no, he actually did. But he had, his friend had forgotten this opportunity.
Wow.
Because he was so wrapped up in the victimhood, he
Right.
couldn't see something right in front of his face. That when we're in victim mentality, we can't see opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's very true. Guides are, they understand our anthropology. So if you take the limited information I have in psychology, because I didn't graduate with it, I didn't graduate as a master's, but is about what we call anthropological psychology. In anthropological psychology, they look at the entire human being through anthropology instead of through cultures. And the guides don't care about cultures. They'll point it out to you. What in the culture is upsetting your anthropology. So in anthropological psychology, they break down the human existence to very simple, non-complex features. So in anthropological psychology, you have the family group, the friends group, and the trader, as in exchanging things for money and food and things like that. Trading group, not trader as if they were a trader, but trading group, I guess is a better word. And if anything in those three groups is upset, you become obsessed and causing you mental stress. Victim is going to either take away your trading group, your family group, and or your friend group. And if it gets all three, he lost his house. Friend group goes away. He's got his family in a car. Family group went away. And it started with the trading group. So that person had hit all three, and your father found a way to bring him back, to realize he was okay. He had someone to trade with, aunt. He had friends still. Your dad was his friend, and to help him, to keep his family safe. And all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh. And if you can keep any of those three upset, you can control the entire person. And this is one thing they've learned with mass media. Last time we talked about energetic PTSD. Well, by keeping the political world upset, it keeps your trading group upset. Keeps it all in discourse. And depending on your history, past life and current life is how much upset that is. And then they can control the friends group and the family group. And that's one of the big ways they've learned to control populations, is by messing with those three groups.
Yeah, you've brought up both in this interview and also in past ones about the intent of sort of that there's a cultural meme that can control us, right? And so we as individuals would like to learn how to separate ourselves from the manipulation of the greater intent that's trying to keep us unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the work we do, when we find the soul's personality and you start to recognize it in yourself, then you are automatically not affected nearly as much from these other groups that are trying to control the cultures. So like with me, I do get upset a little because of our political situation, because it's throwing everything into an odd place that we're not used to. I said if the current situation happened before Trump was elected, it was going to be an interesting ride. I didn't say he wasn't going to be elected, because there was a high chance he was going to be elected. And sure enough, we are having an interesting ride, and it is a ride that we need, unfortunately, because it has revealed a whole bunch of stuff in the undercurrent that isn't okay, and we're ignoring it. And so you can look at it from the perspective of the soul and what the planet is learning from it, or you can come back down and be a victim to it. That's up to you.
So to come back to the abortion discussion, a woman can be a victim of the abortion and hold on to the guilt, mm-hmm. and be stuck, possibly holding on to a physical illness.
Yep.
Holding on to the emotions, like my example with my client. Mm-hmm. So in any situation where something negative, or bad, negative, harmful has happened to us in our past, mm-hmm. we can, and it could be a natural disaster. It doesn't have to be someone doing something to us, or something that we chose to do ourselves. It can be, whatever, something negative has happened. Mm-hmm. We can perceive it as negative and hold on to a victimhood around it, which is not allowing us to learn, not allowing us to get to the root cause, mm-hmm. not allowing us to heal our body.
It's a cascade of effects, mm-hmm. and it's not just one. So let's say the abortion, if you feel guilty, it damages parts of your body. What is it doing to the brain? Because the brain controls the part of the body. And that's one part, like the muscle on that lady you were talking about. And it's like, well, what is it getting? Why is the brain feeding that to the body? What is it that's there? So some of them may be the Catholic guilt. But where has it caused problems all the way through their life that led up to the need for the abortion? That's what we have to get to, is what's leading up to that, so that you have to have the abortion, you manifest. That's a big deal. So that's a manifestation. And what are you learning from it? How are you growing from it? Let's remove the cultures and look at it for what it is and the benefits that you got or the other family got. Maybe the soul of the person that was aborted, the body that was aborted, the soul that might have been hooked to it, is going to go on to another family member or be yours again in a better situation. Sometimes people, since we're talking about that, sometimes people will feel the need for an abortion because it's going to be a defective fetus. And they don't know that, but they feel a need to have an abortion. This isn't the right timing because their guides are going, nope, this isn't right. And the sometimes it's just it's in other words, there's many reasons for things that our cultures overlook.
But if we hold on to the negative, and again, we're not being. I want to say that we're being neutral. We're not being pro-choice or pro-life. We're not taking a stance in this because I want both sides. People who subscribe to either side, and like I think, like you said, the older as we become older souls, we have a problem with staying in that one box, that holding on to a radical.
Very much.
Being in one position, right? Because we can see it from so many angles.
And there's always tons of angles for everything. And the cultures can't incorporate all those.
And so we're not being on either side, but we are saying for those women who've had that happen in their past, that if they're holding on to the guilt and not gaining the positive learnings, like you said, because in any bad experience, whether it's a tornado, an earthquake, it doesn't have to be abortion. Any negative experience,
right,
to which we're holding negative emotions, we can find positive learnings in order to let go, in order to learn, in order to grow, in order to gain more spiritual health.
Well, just from someone going through a medical thing like an abortion or anything else, you gain a massive amount of compassion for it if you're not a victim to it. And then you can actually help someone else that's going through something similar. If you're a victim, you can't. You try to help someone else, your victim energy is going to come out and give them victim energy. Or if you come through it with no victim, then you can have that God-like pure compassion that's not judgmental.
Just like abortion is a very hot topic, miscarriages are very, very common, and yet it is so painful to talk about. Women feel shame and guilt. They blame themselves. They feel like they're broken or something's wrong with them.
Again, culture is victimizing those women.
What could you say to the women who've had those experiences in their past and maybe it's still raw or still hurts, or they're still holding on to negative emotions? What could you say to help them to heal?
Well, first of all, if they didn't have those emotions, why exist? The fact that they're good people, they have emotions. And you need to embrace that emotion without the guilt or the fear. That's the very first step, is realizing how wonderful a person you are because you can feel that. And then be with it. It's like anyone dying in the family. You don't get over it. You have to place it. If you go into the cultures that have to do around a miscarriage or something, or an abortion, you're never going to find the value in the human being that you are, that feels the things they feel because they're a good, wonderful person. If someone has a miscarriage or an abortion and they feel nothing, what's wrong? If they feel, that's wonderful, and they have to. And if they feel outside the culture, it can turn to compassion and love, and turn to kind support for other women that are going through that. And you can be an ear, you can be a therapist for them, just at any given moment. If you truly embrace this good person that has these feelings, then you come to peace with it. and then you can be used as a tool. If you're in the victimhood, if you're in the culture that keeps you from coming peace to it, with it, it keeps you from learning then, and the guides cannot use you for your gift of compassion and love that you gain from these experiences. It never becomes that gift. So that is the first and primary step, is seeing what a wonderful person you are for having that, for missing the opportunity of this fetus. And the reason we feel so guilty is because we don't know that that fetus is probably going to be born to you sometime down the line. Or that soul is still going to come to you, excuse me, not fetus. But the soul is going to come in another fetus, but one more suited to that soul. Miscarriages, and like I said earlier, abortions can be the impetus because it's not an effective body for what that soul needs. And so it knows it'll come in to give, like this lady I talked to you about that was in her 50s. She had great learning from it. And when she learned that she didn't kill anybody, it opened her life up to help others. That fetus wasn't meant to come to fruition. It was meant to teach her that this isn't a horrible thing. It took a number of years after the fetus for this to be revealed that it was her grandchild. But it was like, this is what was supposed to happen. It was a lesson in all of this for her to realize, oh my gosh, the church doesn't actually know everything.
So is there free will? I mean, could she have said no and moved forward and had that child and the soul come into,
Of course. And she might have become very maimed from it or died. And those are valuable lessons as well.
So there's free will, and at each step in the road, there's valuable lessons from our choices.
I look at it this way, or this is what I've been taught. We have certain things we're going to do. Certain major blocks in your life, much like astrology, the major tangents. We're going to do them. There's no choice. And so everything's going to lead to these moments. But the guides will use anything that comes up along the way to teach you. So if you make choice, you have two choices, like with that lady, either have an abortion and possibly remain healthy for the rest of her life, or not and possibly dying, and how it might affect if she lived and things like that. She's making a choice. The fact that the choice is there is what would be part of the Akashic record, karma, whatever words you might want to use. Which choice she makes, then the guides will use that. That one that was supposed to, which was the abortion. And the other was, well, you have it, you're going to be sick, and on, or die. And then the child is going to be raised in this set of circumstances. And probably if she would have had it, maybe that same son that fetus was going to be born to would be raising that child from that point on. We don't know these things. And when we try to legislate them, it doesn't work. We mess it up. That's why in our fight it's not the fight for abortions, it's the fight for women's rights. Because that's the fight. You can have the choice to have the lessons from the choice versus having it governed. And that's what, since we're on the subject, that's what our forefathers put into our Constitution, was the choices, so that things could work out not according to a tyrannical government, but according to freedom of choice. And it makes it confusing. It makes it all muddled up. It's not clean and nice and defined, but it still keeps free choice. So we have our lessons, not something dictated by somebody else. So because the lessons are much sweeter when they come from ourselves. When we can get in that soul's personality, it's amazing what you can do. The most tragic things can become the sweetest things there ever were. And just because the child might be born into another body, the soul, doesn't mean you still won't mourn the one that disappeared for whatever reason, was because you're a good person. Again, back to that. That's a wonderful gift. But they take it away with our culture. So it keeps us from the enlightenment, from finding the joy. So it's a sad state of affairs what has occurred in my book in the removing of freedom, our personal choices, and and that's, again, we had to look at that, and that's why the current administration is in, about what was happening underneath, so that we're slowly taking away our freedoms from both sides. And we had to look at that and establish the things we will establish over the next 10 or 15 years, a whole new way of existing in our country. And it's going to be with free rights. It will be with women's rights, because we've realized that all rights, we've realized that this in the background is being eroded, taken away. And now everyone's going, oh, heck, we don't know what we're doing yet, but something's really wrong and we're going to change it. And so it's going to be changed. That's why I said it. It's going to be interesting. And it continues that way.
What can we do to open our perception to hear advice from our guides?
It's that timeline. First of all, some people, I mean, everyone has things they can learn in each life. So by remaining in free will, by remaining and valuing who we are, we become a better tool for where our gifts are currently in our current life. So let's say we have people in the lives of discovery. These are the people I see most. And they have what in some circles we call a totem. The totem is a symbolic gesture that talks about, maybe you have these different animals on the totem, or of that, or an object on the totem, and it's telling you that these gifts are available in this life. They've already done it in past life, they've earned it, and they are available. When we're caught in our cultures, the negative cultures we've developed, you can't use the gifts well. When you come to the place of no judgment, that's the place of joy, where you look at things from that moderate point of view and can find the full value. Then, and I find pretty much only then, can those totem animals come to you, because you're not caught in your pain and suffering. You're in joy, and then you can look at things through those gifts from a neutral place. If you're caught in pain and suffering, that is going to influence what we call the cognitive biases. So, for example, I worked with a lady, which I'll just use her first name, Laura, for a couple of years, side by side, in tandem with clients, but only the female clients. She could not work with the male clients. Now, she was a master, but very injured, and she wouldn't work through it. So she saw everything in the male clients as something, because men have testosterone. So she saw testosterone as a very, very negative thing, even though she had it too. But so the male libido and the male imagination is governed by testosterone, especially when you're young. And so men's psyche goes all over the place. You know, when they talk about boys in school, about every 2 seconds, they got to think about testosterone related things. And and she would see that in a man's energy field and feel threatened by it. So these certain aspects of her totem could come out, but a whole bunch more couldn't, because of her own fears. Well, if we're asking to use our our gifts, how can we do that coming from a negative victim place? Can't do it. You'll put cognitive bias to everything the guides say, instead of being neutral.
That reminds me, in Huna, which is the sort of spirituality that comes from ancient Polynesia and Hawaii, they have this image, this drawing of 3 points, the higher self, the conscious mind, and the unconscious mind. And it's like a Vesica Pisces, where each one has a circle. So the where the heart is the unconscious mind in this drawing, and the one in the middle is the conscious mind, and then the one up above the head is the higher self, where the information from guides would come from.
Right.
And in this drawing in ancient Hawaii, they would say that the information comes from the higher self into the unconscious, and then the unconscious then gives it to the conscious. So kind of like eyesight or hearing, it is all information through our five senses is filtered first through our unconscious mind and through the reticular activating system of the brain before it is filtered highly. And so we think we're always aware of everything that our senses have, but we're not. Like, you're not aware of the feeling of your feet in your sandals or your shoes until I mention it, because your brain deleted that information because it wasn't relevant to right now. So our brains are always deleting or distorting information that's coming in through our five senses, our unconscious brain, right? And what we don't think about often, but what they illustrated in Huna is that the unconscious bias, the filters, the unconscious mind also filter the spiritual information coming through our intuition or our guides. And so if we have negative beliefs, our guides could be giving us really great information, but because it's coming through the filter of our unconscious first, that it can be distorted. So I think that's what you're describing.
We are. It's very powerful, and it has to do with your intent. So you're sit here, and if you are in fear on a subject matter, you cannot be clear about it. That's why masters are all moderates. Yes, they have I have my biases. I can't help it because I'm living a human existence. That's why the work is inclusive, because I can't be used for everything. I have biases. I was born in the United States. That's a bias compared to being born in South Africa. And so it truly takes a village because of those very biases. It's like I can see the future through my biases, but you can't be predicting the future like Nostradamus by himself. You have to predict the future. People that can all do this come together in a group to get the full perspective around one subject. So someone may be over at 10-degree perspective, someone may be at 30 degrees, someone may be at 36 degree, some etc., looking at the same subject matter, and you get a then full picture. Instead of these, like Nostradamus, the pictures were very vague, and you could apply it to many things. Yes, he was good, no question about that, but it wasn't a full picture, so we don't know what he meant. Well, if you're working with clients every day, you can't go into the don't know what you meant by your own cognitive biases. So it limits your healing ability to be used as a healer. Now, if you take the human subject as well, just who we are as a human, when we're not satisfied with who we are for various reasons, injuries usually, we always want to be somebody else. So there's many healers, we call them wannabe, because they want to be a healer because they grandicize that as being someone important. Where a true healer, a true master, they feel none of that. They literally feel like the most normal person on the planet. Where people who want to be, and they seek out, much like becoming a doctor, they seek out these spiritual things. It's because we are spiritual beings, we're curious about it. But a lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen it, it's the impetus for it is out of injury. And if that's the impetus, that limits extremely what your guides can use you for.
Until you heal that injury.
Until you heal that injury. Then it expands automatically. I have many clients who have gone on to become spiritual powerhouses that you've heard of in our area and around the world. because we've cleared up all this other stuff through their processes here and other people they've gone to. And all of a sudden, their past doesn't matter. And then, like, there's a very well-known hypnotist and another one, animal talk person around in the areas. And I worked with them both before they even started their businesses up. They couldn't figure out what to do. They had these little gifts, but it wouldn't come together. And we found out who, what, when, where, and why. And all of a sudden, it starts manifesting for them. Where without that healing, they would have, maybe the animal talk person would have couldn't look through the innocent. They could only look through the injury and the fact that she loved animals and only animals because she couldn't trust humans. Well, then you're hearing from the animals all the negative things about humans, and that's not useful to a guide. So she gets through the injury, and all of a sudden she takes that same gift and can now expand it because you're coming through an innocent perspective. And she finds out all these wonderful things about animals now. She travels all over the world, and we just solidified it for her. Same with the hypnotists. She travels all over the world now, doing things with people all over the world. She's amazing at it. And I get her newsletters and all that other stuff. And and it's someone you know. and it's like, it just solidified it for her. And so I look at that and go, I was a little bitty part of her healing group that allowed her, and I don't take credit for it, except just my little part that got her to be able to go, whack, there it is. Her gifts, her guides can then use her. And I know my part was just a little one, but it's part of her village. And I'd love to know the rest of the parts of her village because it's amazing what she's able to do. So that's how you start using those gifts, the totem. Then once you're using them all, or a large portion of them, then you have demonstrated your spiritual growth. And then new gifts start showing up. All of a sudden the clarity becomes solid. Or all of a sudden you're able to work with people that you would never even dream of working with. A whole different direction to your healing practice. Because you have gotten, your psychology has become healthy. So it's one step ahead of your gifts. If your psychology is behind your gifts, you're doing it out of ego. And we call that, we talked about that earlier, that's called a sorcerer or sorceress. They're working out of ego. And they have the same gifts as a healer. The healer probably has been a sorcerer at one time because they've learned that using things and doing things out of ego and desire can keep you very vulnerable and going into areas of ego and desire. And it's very real. I've worked on people that have a number of people with local and distant sorcerers that they're very serious. And I've had one time I got into someone's energy and my legs went out from under me. I could not stand. My legs were gone. And I collapsed to the floor, and the person on the table jumped up and, oh my God, are you okay? I go, yeah, I am. I just learned something. And the sorcerers, literally, they're the same as a healer, just using it as an ego. And so, I mean, I could technically do all the same things, but I would never do it. I've entered mastery, so that can't happen. And do I make mistakes? Oh, sure. But I don't do my work from a place of ego. I had to reckon with that as far as doing public work, too. Just being on the radio show. Is it coming from a place of ego or coming from a place of healer? And I had to think about it and work with it various times throughout my career.
But just the fact that you're asking yourself, I mean, someone who comes from ego doesn't sit there to contemplate, is this really coming from ego or is this,
They don't. And that's what I had to reckon with. Because just getting on talking on your blog here, it could be an egoic thing, or it could be a thing for healing and supporting other people. And that's where I've had to learn to keep it there, if at all possible. Do I have opinions? Yes. Just like any other human. Do some of them stink? Oh, you betcha. But the intent is to not create karma and to remain is to remain in integrity. And I have never sought any of this. It's just there. So now, I want people to understand that when I'm talking here, when people are egoically seeking to do healing, that is also a good thing. It's just not mastery. When you seek, like, you to become a Reiki master, you are literally redefining by going through the process of how you feel energy. And it's bringing it to you so that in future lives you can use that. So these processes are very important of ego seeking and becoming, trying to be a healer because you want to be. It's a very important part of it, because you're discovering the various ways that God reveals itself to the world. It's just not a neutral thing that the master has. It's an ego-driven thing. So in the lives of discovery, you maybe want to learn Reiki. You maybe want to learn herbology. You want to do this, and you have to apply it to make a living. So I'm not finding any fault with any of that. It's just not a master yet, where you come in having access to all that information in a neutral way. So, and a master has masters all have agreements set up that they do not create karma at all costs. And how do you negotiate that is what the individual has to figure out, because that's part of the lesson. So how I negotiate doing public work is an important lesson for me in how to do that. The ascending masters are amazing at it. They're great in the public, they're great in everything. They're just good at everything and remain in that neutral spot. I'm learning that. I'm not there yet. So I've had to find it within myself. And without wanting to do that, I would never have the experience of trying it and finding those places. So that's why I never poo-poo these things. It just is, when they take that and say, that's it, and that's the end all for everything, that's when I find a problem, because that's very high ego. And so like Reiki is not the end all. It's not, you can't do everything. Being a chiropractor, you can't fix everything. Being a herb person or a naturopath, you can't fix everything. And it's an ego drive to do that. And the ones I like are the ones that are open. They're amazing people. And the ones that are closed with it, they're not amazing. They still may do good work, but they're not amazing. So it's, perspective and intent is everything. And we have to have intent. And so like with my guides, I have set up situations with them where no matter what, I don't want to create karma. And they literally cut me off if I start to do that. Sometimes I have to do that because of my life. I have to have my lessons too. But they let those ones go by. But the ones that I can screw up, they stop me from doing it. So I don't create more karma.
So as our gifts come into fruition, our guides can help us.
Very much so.
And we can ask our guides to also help us not use our gift to disrupt karma or to create karma.
Right. Damage on a spiritual level. Because remember, the bodies, they whine and complain a lot, but they're a vessel for learning. We're grateful for them. We need to love them. We need to respect them. We need to give them hugs. We need to say, I'm sorry. We need to, because of our spiritual pathway, it causes strain to the body. We need to do all those things. They have to be very, very valuable and held very tightly. But they're secondary compared to the soul's pathway. And there's a convoluted patterning that takes place with you might say, a series of Venn diagrams where the cultural laws and the spiritual laws cross over. And one creates spiritual growth and the other creates physical growth in these common areas. So some spiritual pathways create human evolution. Human evolution in the form of all these laws and cultures, create the incidences for spiritual growth. If it was legal to kill people, there would be no reason, there would be no lessons if you were involved in a killing of another human being. So we have to have those cultural laws to provide the spiritual growth. So it's all balance. And when you start getting the extremes, it's out of balance. And that's in all directions. That's why healers or masters will always be in that neutral place. Always, when they're working with people.
Yeah, because an idea came to mind when we were talking about needing to maintain women's rights and free will to choose to have an abortion or not. Mm-hmm. The idea came to my mind, well, what about laws like DUI or murder? Like, why should we have laws to prevent us from doing other things that would take away a free will? If someone wanted to choose to drink and drive or choose to murder someone, those laws are imposing free will, right? Mm-hmm. Just like abortion would be, to take it away would be kind of like taking away the free will. But what you're saying is that we need some laws and balance. We need balance, right? I'm talking very extremes here. Right. We need the balance in the laws in order for us to create circumstances to learn from.
Correct. So like someone you mentioned, drunk driver. Well, we think it's wrong. And it is. It's really wrong for the human body. And I will go there, period. It's wrong. But is that drunk driver creating karma? Or is he playing a part in the drama, in the karma, that the van full of people, that half of them die in from an accident from the drunk driver hitting them or getting in the way? We say the drunk driver needs to be punished and it's all karmic or sin and this and that and the other. Well, maybe they're playing a part that says, I have to hit this car so that this many people die, so that the karma between them takes place. And you're just a role. So that then the person does have to be punished because he's driving drunk. And because not every drunk driver is fulfilling a karmic role. And but we also have to love the drunk driver because he may be playing a role that is fulfilling someone else's karma, or it sets up in motion his or her karma.
And the circumstances that allow these people to learn from, to gain spiritual growth.
Right. The circumstances are the laws that say no. And then it puts a punch into the growth. It shoves it over the edge. And so if you're a drunk driver, you go to jail. You feel guilty. Maybe you killed 10 or 15 people in a bus or something like that. But it was something that you had to do. But you feel so guilty about it because of our cultures that you go to jail and you learn all sorts of new things. And you feel guilty, so you're interested in learning. Maybe you get some psychotherapy. Maybe you find Jesus or Muhammad or something in jail, and and you learn a whole different new way of existing. It would never have happened if you didn't drive drunk and kill a bunch of people.
I know two people, they fortunately didn't kill anyone, but I know two people who had DUIs who that was the event that had them completely change their life.
Exactly. And without the laws, it would never have boosted them into that. And then if you look at it, if you expand the picture, if they didn't hit someone, if they didn't have that event, and it had to amp up to get them to change and grow in their life, then it may have been far more tragic.
This sounds a lot like in naturopathic medicine. We've had many naturopaths on the show, even from day one. The first episode of this show, over 3 years ago, talk about that when we talk about physical health, that the body speaks to us in symptoms, and the symptoms start off as whispers. So maybe you have a little shoulder tension or a little tiny headache, like a really small, easy, manageable symptoms, the body's whispering. And if we ignore it or we self-medicate, we take a Tylenol or an Advil or we drink coffee or whatever we do to over the counter or prescription-wise, we look to self-medicate, we look to push down the symptoms. We're not listening to the body, or we don't realize that the body has this language is trying to communicate something. The more we not listen to the symptoms and keep going, the symptoms get stronger and stronger and stronger. And all of a sudden we're going to get hit by the cosmic 2x4. And that's the body yelling at us. And so if we can catch ourselves when the symptoms are small, correct something really soon, like you catch something in pre-diabetes, very easy. I mean, type 2 diabetes is easy to correct anyway, but it does come with a host of, by the time you're full-blown diabetic, you've done damage to your eyesight, to your circulation, to your heart. You may not realize it. So it's best to catch something when you notice a few weird symptoms, like I'm waking up in the middle of the night to pee, or why am I angry and kind of hungry 45 minutes after eating, or why am I really sleepy in the afternoon? You catch those symptoms early on, you can correct it. And what you're describing is like spiritual symptoms that if we don't learn and we ignore, then it can get, it's kind of like the lesson comes harder and harder and harder until we do.
Oh, it completely amplifies. We do that. We talked about magnets in one of the previous talks, where each incident around a wound is like your main wound is your main magnet stuck to your belly, and each incident is another magnet. And we will keep getting magnets until we get this huge pile of magnets that forces us to do our homework. Or we can look at it when we start collecting the magnets. And they're designed to get us to search for growth, search for wisdom, search for God. And it's a perfect system. If you're stubborn, you're going to get a lot more magnets. And you're going to get a lot bigger and bigger drama. And that's not enlightened. Enlightened is going to look at each high and low of the day and go, okay, what am I learning from that? Sometimes it takes a day or 2 or 3 to do that, but not a year or 2 or 10 or 15. And and it's when you get this huge pile that you literally, if you had a pile of magnets in front of you, kept adding to it, pretty soon you're looking at a pile of magnets. And if someone says boo to you, you look through the magnets and think, why the hell did you say boo to me? Instead of interesting. So yes, very much so. That pile, we're designed to amp up in everything until we finally tell whatever happens that is necessary. So that goes back to the guides will use whatever happens to bring you to your lesson. It's not all planned. The major things are planned, but the rest of them, which can become major, are not planned.
What kind of introspection or what kind of questions can we ask ourselves in order to gain the positive learnings?
What is it that's giving me question? So when a person's stuck, for example, why? Like a person, like, let's say you want to break up with someone you've been living with, and or someone you've been have a romantic relationship with, but you just want to break up and you think it's over. And you're not married, so it's an easy thing to do, for example. And you're stuck. You don't know whether to stay with them or not stay with them. Well, if there wasn't a problem, when you weren't afraid of being a victim, and you weren't afraid of all the cultural things of being alone and all these different things, the fact that you're having a fight in you is in fact your old soul going, this person isn't for you. But the self, the one that wants to be with someone because of culture, security, money, whatever it is going, no, no, no. Well, if your soul guides weren't telling you, you wouldn't have the controversy in you. So if you got the controversy in you, it's the thing tearing you apart. It's tearing the default personality from the soul's personality. You better pay attention, because the soul's not going to tell you to break up with someone if it's meant to be. It'll have you keep working through the problems. that develop by two people being together naturally are there. If the guide's telling you no, well, then pay attention to it. We don't pay attention. Our guides are constantly, if you're in the lives of discovery, our guides are constantly telling us what's going on by those knowings. But again, our cultures keep us stuck. Being alone, being whatever it is, keeps us totally stuck in every way. So listen to the truth, no matter how painful it is. If you listen to it in the beginning, it is easy to work your way through it. If you pull in the cultures of, no, I must do it this way, then it amps up and it becomes a very difficult thing to do. So listen. That's why I've told my kids the same thing. If it's just not there, listen to it. And if it is there, it'll work out. So, and that's where we fight it.
Thank you so much. My last question, I think I asked this last time, but I like this question.
Okay.
Is there a message that, because all the people who are now listening in the future, because there's no time to guides and angels, are all the people who are listening, their guides know that they're listening. Do any of them have a message that wants to come through? Or is there a message for all the listeners or a message for some of the listeners? Is there anything that would like to come through that's important?
Well, we talked about what to do today. The guides are big on this. We wrote the newsletter article on it.
Happiness is a choice. Enlightenment is deeper.
Yes. Happiness is a choice. You can go to a party. You can go to a party. You can go to whatever. But it is the intent that we have to go deeper, to find who we are. We have to have the intent of not listening to the cultures, but listening to our soul's knowledge that is coming through at all times. That is very deep, and it will keep you moving on in life. And in the lives of discovery, that's the only way we're going to be happy. So it's like in you. If you're supposed to do the radio show for the next 40 years, it will keep coming, and there will be new things to keep you growing. If you're not supposed to, you'll find things that becomes redundant. And you can keep trying, but the world won't be manifesting for you if that were the case. And you have to look at the writing on the wall. Okay, what is it then that if you do it early, you can either adjust your media access or change it, whatever it needs to be done, and it's easy. If you realize and you keep hanging on and trying and struggling, it's going to become very difficult when the world slaps you in the face versus evolution. Guides will always, and this is something that the New Age, I don't think, acknowledges real well, they will turn anything into development. So nothing is right or wrong. And it is that takeaway today is to get to that place of the soul's personality where it looks at everything as not right or wrong, but as in what we're learning from it. So that we can, yes, choose to be happy, but we can also choose to evolve with intent. And then you have joy. And then happiness becomes important, but takes a secondary role. Because it is the joy that's 24/7. So that's maybe a message for your clients today. Is learn to look at that intuition early on. So the guides can help you.
Yeah, listen to the whispers instead of waiting for it to get. If there's a bunch of drama happening in your life, it's possible that you haven't been listening to the whispers.
Just slightly possible, like huge. And I mean, sometimes drama is part of our karma. Sometimes it's part of raising kids. It's part of your process. If you don't have the drama, you're not being a good parent, so you'd actually create karma. But where we take it, if we take our, like with the kids, if we take and we resent our kids for creating drama, you're not in enlightenment. You're not there. If you say, okay, this is the moment, this is the teaching moment, and 5 seconds later, you're in the next thing. I found it really fascinating with my kids, because I'm not perfect, but I have an interesting point of view in life. But I would be sitting there having to have to discipline my boys, or one of them, and the others would come up to me and, are you done yet? Right in the middle of it, because they know I don't pull from one into another. I can literally be disciplining and teaching this kid how to live in the world as best I can demonstrate to him, and not be real happy. And then the next second, oh, so you want to go play baseball? Okay, good. Because I'm not carrying it.
You're not spewing anger at all your kids because you're disciplining one of them.
Right. I'm just disciplining one of them, teaching them how to get along in the world from a perspective, which teaches them to take in more perspectives and learn their own space. And if you don't, then your kid isn't going to learn to do that. So you do that. But I don't carry that to the next. At least once in a while, I'll go, nope, I got to pull away. It's like, I'll answer that later. And then, but I'm right there. It's not, I can take each one of my kids on that day. Do I do it perfectly? No. Do I do it better than most? Hopefully. So far, it seems to be working out that way. So anyway, we have to look at the highs and lows in order to find the ego, in order to come to that place of neutrality in the center. And then the guides literally start opening up. How you get there is different for everybody. Do we help with that? Yes. And am I the one and only? No, not by any means.
Thank you so much, Eric. Listeners can check out ericthorton.com. Of course, the links to everything that Eric does is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. And definitely check out all the other episodes that Eric's been on. I'll make sure that we have that all listed and linked in the show notes of today's podcast. It's been a pleasure having you back on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here. It's always fun.
Hello, true health seeker. Have you ever thought about becoming a health coach? Do you love learning about nutrition and how we can shift our lifestyle and our diet so that we can gain optimal health and happiness and longevity? Do you love helping your friends and family to solve their health problems and to figure out what they can do to eat healthier? Are you interested in becoming someone who can grow their own business, support people in their success? Do you love helping people? You might be the perfect candidate to become a health coach. I highly recommend checking out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I just spent the last year in their health coaching certification program, and it really blew me away. It was so amazing. I learned over 100 dietary theories. I learned all about nutrition, but from a standpoint of how we can help people to shift their life and shift their lifestyle to gain true holistic health. I definitely recommend you check them out. You can Google Institute for Integrative Nutrition or IIN and give them a call, or you can go to learntruehealth.com/coach and you can receive a free module of their training to check it out and see if it's something that you'd be interested in. Be sure to mention my name, Ashley James, in the Learn True Health podcast, because I made a deal with them that they will give you the best price possible. I highly recommend checking it out. It really changed my life to be in their program, and I'm such a big advocate that I wanted to spread this information. We need more health coaches. In fact, health coaching is the largest growing career right now in the health field. So many health coaches are getting in and helping people because you can work in chiropractic offices, doctors' offices, you can work in hospitals, you can work online through Skype and help people around the world. You can become an author, you can go into the school system and help your local schools shift their programs to help children be healthier. You can go into senior centers and help them to shift their diet and lifestyle to best support them in their success and their health goals. there's so many different available options for you when you become a certified health coach. So check out IIN, check out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, mention my name, get the best deal. Give them a call and they'll give you lots of free information and help you to see if this is the right move for you. Classes are starting soon. The next round of classes are starting at the end of the month. So you're going to want to call them now and check it out. And if you know anyone in your life who would be an amazing coach, please tell them about it. Being a health coach is so rewarding and you get to help so many people. Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.